Joe, thank you so much for joining us here today. I am so excited to talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Lindsay.
There is no one who I would rather talk about this very important topic than you. The importance of psychological safety. In a lot of my research over the past couple of years and just in my experience in leadership, it is the number one predictor of high performing teams is the ability to create psychological safety on a team. And I have had the privilege of experiencing that working under your leadership. And so, yes, I'm just really excited to talk to you about it today. But I want to start to just level set because I think
Sure.
psychological safety is a term that not everybody knows the definition, or people might have different definitions. How do you define psychological safety?
For me, it really is just about the ability of members of a team, I mean, any team, any size, it doesn't matter if it's a large team or a small team, but where individuals feel that they can bring their whole self to what they are doing. And I think a lot of the time we forget that we work together, but yes, we spend a lot of time together, but there are people that are outside of the work. And, it does cross over. And that psychological safety is really giving that ability to be yourself in the work that you do, bring the good things, that sometimes the challenges, and giving that space to be able to have open dialogue around those.
Absolutely. And often, again, what when I was thinking about this topic, you instantly came to mind because you created it so well. Sometimes we're drawn to the topic because we haven't experienced it in the way that we would have
Yeah.
liked. So, in your background and your experience, we don't have to name names, but have you worked on teams where you felt the power of psychological safety from the positive and also where maybe there was an absence of it?
Definitely. I think all of us, if you work in any career, you're going to have it at different points. I think the best example that I have of where it worked well was the ability to have those conversations and to, a great ability to a leader or a leader being able to take that feedback from their team. And I think for me, it was when I had a leader that I worked with where you could say to them, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you this. And they would stop. And they would stop and listen because the minute that you said that to them, they knew that it was something that they needed to really take heed of. Opposite side to that is
Yeah.
where you have leaders where you feel like you're playing to the ego that goes along with it, and you never know what you're going to get on a day by day basis. It's hair on fire one day, where another day it's going to feel really quiet, and then the next day you're wondering what happened, what did you do wrong, and you don't have any way of being able to address it. So I think the most important part is finding a balance on it, but it's also being able to, again, where you think about that ability to have that honest feedback. And there's a lot of companies, a lot of organizations now that are talking about, when you're doing either 360 feedback on leaders or the absolute pure transparency of being able to give feedback. Feedback's a gift. And I think leaders often forget that because the ego. And one of the things I've always said to the leadership teams that I work with is you can't be taking things personal. It's not necessarily you, it's the chair. The role that you're in dictates that when you're leading, you're going to have some people that aren't necessarily going to agree with every decision you make. But what you want to be able to do is give them that ability to question the why, and then give them the ability to understand the why at the same time.
Yeah, it's so important understanding the why. And I
Hmm.
think that often gets missed in feedback. Someone might just give, you're not doing X or you're not doing Y, but how does that connect to the purpose? And, one thing I love about your leadership as well, Joe, is that you're really connected to values of people and
Hmm.
purpose, and you feel that balance. And so, how do you use that values driven philosophy to create psychological safety and to be able to create feedback and give the why?
Well, I think one of the things I had a former colleague, a leader who's no longer with the company that I work in now, but one of the things they said is that when you're meeting with somebody and you're sitting across the table from them, that it does not matter the position of each person, the hierarchical position, that there is something to be gained by both individuals in that point. And that could be as a leader, sometimes we get that thought of, especially you work in a much different space between all of the different people in
Mm-hmm.
your team, that you can lose touch with it. So giving that ability to where you can connect with people, understand who they are, but also giving that ability to listen and realize that you can learn just as much from a person who has just started with your team as you can from somebody who has 30 or 40 years experience. And it's sometimes it's that's what keeps us as leaders stuck in our ways, is thinking, no, 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 I can't go talk to so and so because they're way, way down here. The
Yeah.
reality is there is no way down here. And I think when I talk about ego, that checking of the ego, checking of the hierarchical titles, that is that key point to being able to do. If you can check that and be able to open your mind, open the door to those discussion points and break down some of those barriers that people just perceive that have to be. And the perception is there for a
Yep.
reason, because often leaders will create that.
Mm.
But the best experience I had when I first became a VP was realizing that the office that I was working out of, people didn't want to step over the threshold of that office. It was just a spooky thing for them.
Yeah.
It's like going into the principal's office.
Yeah.
You enter into that door and nothing good is going to happen. I started to do was, when we would do a huddle on a regular basis, start doing the meeting in my office, demystify it, take that
Yeah.
away where there is not that separation. And it got to a point where staff would just walk in, and if the
Mm.
door was open, staff would walk in. So when you talk open door policy, you actually have to have an open door policy, but it is really taking some of those myths and try and demystify them as much as possible.
And not not only taking the myths, but it's taking how we traditionally view leadership, the hierarchy,
Yes.
even in family dynamics, and anytime where there's a differential in pay or in title,
Hmm.
and it's really breaking it down. So making
It
not only
is.
the doors open, literally, figuratively, philosophically, but it's changing culture,
It is.
really.
Really is. And you think about it from the lens, especially different generations when you grow up. I look at growing up, and all of my friends' parents were Mr. and Mrs. That's what you
Hmm.
naturally would call them.
Yes.
That wasn't what I wanted when my daughters were growing up. It was Joe.
Hmm.
And I didn't
Hmm.
want to be called Mr. or, Mr. Reid. That's not it's again that creating of that hierarchy. And it's, I think sometimes people think that it's a respect thing. And when you lose that hierarchy, you're losing the respect. I think you get a lot more respect from people when you're just being yourself rather than having to have a title associated with it.
Absolutely. And so on that same vein of hierarchy and different levels, just by the nature of the amount of people that you manage indirectly, Joe, you oversee all of wealth management impact
Mhm.
investing. That means you have directors, senior managers, team leads, you have member facing staff as well. How do you ensure your team leads, your managers, those underneath you are creating psychological safety on their teams?
I think a big part of it with leaders is first of all giving them the space to recognize that when they come on board, getting to know their staff is such an important part. And I will say to salespeople that you need to have those fluff conversations, and I call them fluff, and it's a way that people can think, well, you're minimizing it. It's not. In fact, what the fluff conversations are really the getting to know the person. What did you do on the weekend? Tell me about your vacation. What's important to you? What are the names of your kids? And I think leaders have to do that. First of all, if you've got leaders in your chain of command, so to speak, that you need to free those leaders up to be themselves, so that when they are speaking with their staff members, that they are asking those same questions that help to build the relationships with your front line or with your members. You need your leaders to be doing that with the staff. And then it's spending the time. Sometimes it's not just about going in and doing a ticky box exercise of, okay, tell me about how the day is going and what sales do you have or what members have you met. It's really about just sitting down from time to time with them and just say, how are you doing? And I think what COVID taught a lot of us when we were working from home, and you talk about the separation in groups, it was a commitment on our leadership team that we wanted to make sure that we touch base with every single staff member. We did it like this virtually because you
Yeah.
weren't able to see everybody, but you had to. And I remember during the first part of COVID going through, it took me a while to meet with every single staff member in the line of our team, but just taking that moment and realizing as well, again, demystifying some of it, we had to get creative to make sure the staff weren't thinking that they were in trouble when the
Right.
VP is calling them. But it's also about giving that just that human touch to it, and being able to just say, not coming in with an agenda. It's a casual conversation. How are you doing? Just talk to me a little bit about what's going on. What can I do to make things easier? What can we do to make things easier? So if leaders commit to that, that's how you start to, again, break those walls down. But it also leads to a much better engagement from your overall team and trust, which is one of the most important parts in a team.
Yeah. Something else that you did, Joe, that I noticed that helped me as someone who reported into you, who had a team underneath me, create psychological safety is just by how you modeled it with the leaders on your team and allowing us to express our dissenting views,
Mhm.
allow us to express our concerns, right? Whenever there would be something that would come down through the pipe that might be perceived as not, whether it is or isn't, might be perceived as not being positive. You gave us the space and the freedom to safely voice our concerns. And I was able to do that with my team. How do you balance allowing that freedom of venting or sharing your dissenting views by still driving positive, driving towards a
Mhm.
positive framework? Like, how do you balance those?
So I even look at it, it's different when you're dealing with leaders to dealing with individual contributors. I'll
Mm-hmm.
start with leaders. I think it's giving the space to be that spot where they can come to close the door or pick up the phone and just vent. And the venting part sometimes can be such an important part because as a leader, you have to put on a mask. And that mask is
Yep.
you cannot show if you're frustrated. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be able to show the team that you're working very much like a parent has to do with
Yep.
your kids. So it's giving that space to be able to do that. It's also giving that space to, I say to the leadership team, when we're in the room, um, everything's on the table. We check our egos and titles at the door, and we want to have a dissenting voice because groupthink can actually be just as detrimental as a negative view in the room. But it's an important one to make sure you're not just doing the same thing over and over and over again. But when you leave that room, you're one united voice when you're going out, and it's important to have that time to speak. Where how you balance it out when you're dealing with an individual contributor can be a little bit different, and part of that is because each role is going to be different, and it's helping them to connect what their role is to the overall strategy or the overall culture or the overall direction or goals that the organization or the team has. And sometimes that is just sitting and listening. I've sat in meetings with individual contributors where the meeting has gone 2, 3, 4 hours, and it's just letting them talk.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's that venting part. It's like anything. It's a customer will sometimes just need to be heard by an organization that they've had a problem with. Well, team members are the same. If they're feeling that the leadership is not listening, that creates a distrust. So sometimes just letting them have that ability to vent, but then also finding a way to action. You might not be able to action everything, but finding
Yeah.
different ways that you can come back and say, okay, this is why you're feeling this. I understand this now. Let me see what we can actually do on this. Can you help me to maybe get under where this is coming from a little bit more and bring them into it? I often will say to leaders, dropping breadcrumbs is a great
Yeah.
way of being able to lead that change management part. But when you're deep in it, it's really about just taking that time to listen more and talk less on it.
One of the things you've spoken about, and not being called Mr. Reid, being called Joe by your kid, I totally agree with that too. It's part about bringing your authentic self
Mm-hmm.
to work. How do you balance that as a leader, bringing your authentic self? I know you've been very open in sharing, that breaking down walls and destigmatizing certain things. How do you balance the authenticity while also still being professional?
It's, and I think that's always a challenge as a leader. You think if you overshare that you're going to, you're walking that fine line of professionalism. I guess for me, it comes back to that view of bringing the authentic self into what you do. And, I've said to the way that I like to look at things and the feedback that I want to get is a warts and all type of feedback, meaning I want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that's out there. So I think what that also means is that you have to look at when you're talking about bringing your authentic self, just being your authentic self. And, we've we've seen with the influx or the challenges that workers go through, whether it be through COVID, whether it be through stress, you see burnout, you see those different things that come out. So a leader that has the ability has gone through something and can share what they've gone through can make a big difference. And, it is a challenge to be vulnerable. I won't lie. When I started speaking out and came out about my own anxiety attacks that I had during COVID and sharing that, it was a tough thing to do, but it wasn't done as a performative measure. It wasn't done just to, again, tick a box. It was, if I'm going to be committed to really truly breaking down those stigmas, then that's what you do. And it also helps employees to see that, okay, they are human. Because think about
Yeah.
when you were a kid and you see your teacher out of the classroom, you see them out in the shopping mall or the grocery store, and it's like you're kind of scared of them at that point. That demystification, that dropping of that idea of what a VP is or a leader is, that they can see the person beneath it. Actually, it's funny. I had feedback that came to me from some members of my team that the first time they truly thought that was being 100% transparent was when I swore. And it's something I never thought that just by swearing that's showing that, but it was that ability to that I'm being real. And I
Yeah,
guess for that individual or those individuals, it was okay, he's not just a title, he is a person. So it is finding that balance, but it's also as leaders being not afraid to just be yourself. And I think that's the key part. I think a lot of the time we hold back and we think we have to have this image and that people won't respect us if we don't hold up. And I mean, that's rooted in so many things. It can be rooted in the toxic masculinity of different companies and different roles. It can be rooted in just where the traditional nature of what leadership is. But I think that the time for that to change has been a long time, and just being yourself, yeah, I think can go a long way with staff.
absolutely. And part of being yourself and being human is
Hmm.
failure, not just the human part of how we might deal with things, whether it's mental health or otherwise, but actually failing at work, right? Trying
Yeah.
something, throwing an idea out. What's your take on failure and how it connects to psychological safety?
I think first of all, it is crucial. I mean, nowadays nobody gets anything perfect, and I think the one of the challenges that when you're trying to in a company, whether you're building products, you're building services, if you try and make everything have that perfect little bow on it, you're never going to get to release whatever that product or service is, and you're going to get passed by others who are coming out. So it's creating that notion that, okay, we're going to go out, may not have this completely wrapped up. Maybe it's 60, 70, 80%, whatever the number that you feel comfortable with, and that things are going to not work necessarily properly. And being okay with that, I think that starts to create that culture where failure is actually just that next in, maybe it's the old sales training from many, many years ago that the no is the next step to getting a yes.
Yeah.
Dropping something from a point of view where you tried something, it didn't work, and having the confidence to be able to pivot away from it. I think anybody who grew up or was watching the TV show Friends can go back to that one episode where Ross is they're trying to carry the couch up the stairs and pivot. Something that sticks with me a lot because that's what you have to do in leadership sometimes, and that's what you have to do in all roles. It's not just leadership. It's what, try it, doesn't work, move on. And I think where the challenge for leaders is that a lot of the times it's that, okay, if my team fails, then I'm going to fail and I'm not going to be looked at and I'm not going to progress. And I've said to leaders, again, that have had kids, when they have kids of their own, think about it. It's when you're teaching your kid to ride a bike and you can run behind them and hold on to that seat for as long as you want. But at some point, you're going to have to let go. And if they fall, you go over, you help to pick them up, get back on that bike and start to go again. I mean, it's a cornerstone of growing up that we have to learn those things, fall, skin your knee, and move on. But it's again taking that afterwards. What are the learnings from it? What do you do different from it? How do you incorporate that in? And cool, we didn't do a great job on that one, but the next time we're going to do it, we're actually going to do it in a better way, and we learn from it and move on from it is the most important
Absolutely. It's how innovation, right? You
part.
cannot innovate. You cannot
Nope.
be progressive. And I felt that on the team. Whatever we were brainstorming, you were always, yeah, throw out the craziest, whatever ideas. And so you were able to go to the depths of your creativity without being afraid of having the idea shot down or the
Mhm.
idea being crazy, right? Failure is just an important part of life. We do it, like you said, as kids, as babies, something shifts where we
Yep.
feel like we need to be perfect. And so as a leader, to bring it back to create that safety of failure is so important. Sometimes there is a misconception that comfort with failure can be viewed as laziness, like
Mhm.
and also with authenticity, right? Like I'm not feeling my best. I'm going to stay. How do you comment on that, right? The misconception that the failure, the authenticity can create a less driven environment, and how do you balance the drive and still push people to be their best?
Yeah, I think it's like anything. You find that what is the and I talk a lot about this with colleagues, with even my wife when the kids were growing up. It's what is the currency of that person? What makes them tick? And everybody's currency is different. I look at a top salesperson who you think might be driven by just the commissions that they're making, sometimes is the one who just needs that pat on the back more than anybody else. So it's understanding what makes them tick, and why that becomes important is if you're going to have a culture where failure is something that you're looking at and saying, okay, it's okay that we failed on this. It's also recognizing that you don't want to create this culture where failure is all you're shooting for. And I think where
Right.
that comes into play, and I've used this line with even our executives in the organization I'm with, where it's sometimes we play to not win rather or to not lose rather than
Yeah.
playing to win. And I think that that can actually be just as dangerous when you're doing it. But that playing not to lose is playing it so safe that failure doesn't happen. So there is that walking the fine line, but it's if you know your team, you know what makes them tick, you can check in with them at different points to look and say, okay, something's not right here, where I can see this individual who is, they're sort of taking that casual approach to it. Everybody has off days, so I'm okay with an off day, but we need to make sure that we're finding those ways to bring them. And maybe it's just a disengagement. They're not happy with something that's going on at that point. Figure that part out and bring them back in to connect back to the work. And if not, have that sit down where you're just having that conversation and just say, you know what, I'm seeing something that's a little bit different right now. Help me to understand what's going on. And rather than sitting and trying to redo things over and over again with them, just have that honest feedback loop with them to get to the bottom of it. It could be something's just not right at home, something's not right with this, they're just off right now, or it could be a pattern that you have to address in a different way.
Yeah. And the fundamental piece is getting to know someone as a human, getting to
Yeah,
know who they are, truly caring about who they are. Then you're free to fail. And you're also free as a leader to push, to
exactly.
drive, to hold someone accountable. But that it's like for anybody who's listening, right? I'm doing the Pavlov's hierarchy of needs, right? Really trying to get
Yep,
to the underneath needs so that you can get to some of the higher level pieces.
exactly.
So, move if you are to give a new manager some advice on how they would create psychological safety within their teams, what kind of advice would you give to them?
I think the first thing is you have to actually go out and sit with them. And I say
Mm,
that because the reality is I think every leader does this. We come in with these ideas of what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and then the reality when you meet the people is because everybody is motivated in different ways, everybody's communication style, learning style is different. It's really sit down and talk with them understand who they are, understand what, goes back to what are the challenges you've had in the past? What's worked with you? What do you want from your leader? What do you need from your leader? Understanding those things start to actually create that trust rate up front, because a new leader coming in, a team is always going to be skeptical. I think it's human nature to be skeptical of a new person coming in, but if you're showing who you are and you're actually listening to them up front, then what you're able to do is you take that at the individuals and the collective and start to look, okay, here's what I've seen, here's some of the challenges. And then you start to strategize around them rather than coming in with this baked idea. It's a little hard to do that when you just don't know what the makeup of the team is. So I think it really is taking that time to just at the beginning learn them, figure out what the team is, figure out the challenges, and then build it. If you come in and build, you're actually right up without doing that, you're creating no safety for them to speak, because they're going to look at you and say it's that almost that micromanagement. They're coming in, they're changing everything,
Yeah.
and they didn't even bother to ask us anything about us. So
Right back to listening. Right, turn
exactly.
on your. And would your advice be the same if a manager or leader was finding that their safety is dipping, right? They're feeling that people are clamming up or not. Yeah, what would be your advice if they sense
Yeah,
that it's not working?
you know what, I think that, and again, there's a natural ebb and flow that's going to go on,
Mm-hmm.
especially when leaders have been around for a while, and then you get new people that come into the team, or you go through a challenging time. And I think for many of us, and I know COVID, we're talking almost 5, 6 years ago now, that fundamentally changed the way that we had to look at leading, because I always considered one of my strengths being able to read a room. And then when I was doing meetings with large groups on a Microsoft Teams call, I can't read the room because I can't see the faces. So I think it's part and parcel to being able to understand as a leader what you're ultimately trying to get across on it, and be able to move from there. So I think it's not being afraid to realize that what worked before isn't necessarily working now, and taking stock of, okay, why? What's gone on? What has changed in it? Is it we're doing a really important project and people are feeling burnout? Is it that time of year? Are we seeing people being off on sickness or on vacation, and the others are having to pick up the workload? It's getting back down to trying to figure out what was that pivotal change to it. And maybe it's just as I know it may sound, because it is complex to do it, in that you have to ask, but it's just saying to the team, okay, I this isn't working. Tell me why. And going to individuals on the team, number one, that you've built that trust with, that they are going to give you honest feedback, versus the what you want to hear. And then it's just going back through and just looking at it, and pivoting away from maybe what was working before doesn't always work right now, depending on the situation.
Yeah, the other piece I'm taking away, Joe, that I've noticed is a bit of a theme is that one-on-one with
Mhm.
you, right? Instead of it being one on 20 or one on 10, right? Really that individual getting to know someone. One of the obviously important parts that we've talked about, feedback is a gift, right? To be
Mhm.
able to create that safety in giving and receiving feedback. There is a famous ratio of 6 to 1, of 6 positive to 1 negative, and that's another component of a high performing team. So, flipping it on the other side, how do you balance that critical feedback, that dissenting view with positive? How do you inject the the positive part, the 6 on the 6 to 1 ratio
Yeah,
within your
I think
teams?
I think part, and again, a lot of it comes right back to where we've been talking about, which is that communication or getting to know the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing I have learned is that no two people are the same. And what is that positive feedback for one? It comes back to the currency that an individual has. I look at when my daughters were growing up, and if you wanted to look, we probably looked at as really bad parents when we would talk to others. But with the oldest daughter, the fastest way of getting, it wasn't a timeout, it wasn't grounding, it was taking books away. I know that sounds bad as a parent, but it was understanding what her currency. TV wasn't the issue, it was the
Yeah.
books. So it's the same thing, the flip side of what is the positive reinforcement that somebody needs. And I think with staff, it's understanding that that could just be, where they get an email from you. Others, it could be that they need to have the email well be to the entire team. Others, it can be that they want to see a plaque that comes to them. Whatever the case may be, or just it's not just a pat on the back that there's something else. For others, the motivation, and there's nothing wrong with this, is looking at when they've earned it, the promotions, the different parts that are there. So it really is, if you're going to give that feedback, make it be where it is not just that performative one where you're just talking. It's got to be a valid one, and the only way to truly do that is to understand what is important to them. Because if you give feedback to somebody, or the positive feedback to somebody, in a way that it doesn't resonate with them, it's not going to feel like positive feedback to them. So it's finding, again, that currency that's important to them.
And being specific. I love how you
Yeah.
related it to, parenting. It's also connects to sports. You and I are both big sports fans. We like team sports. As a former coach, I used the same fundamental philosophies that you do of connecting one-on-one to each player, right? Trying to create a culture where they're safe. It really is. It doesn't matter if it's family, if it's sports, if it's work. These concepts can help people really in any form of.
You see it in professional athletes. You can watch in a hockey dressing room at the end of the game where they're giving whatever the prize that team, whether it's a hat, sunglasses, it's the old notion of the game ball, the game puck, of out to the best person in that game. And it's not always the one that won them the game. It could be the one who just did something. And sometimes it's just recognizing those small things that actually goes even further than recognizing the big things.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm really into are habits. What's one, if you were to give, again, a new up and coming manager, one habit or one piece of advice, what would that be that would make the biggest impact? What's one habit that they could start to include in their day?
I think for me, the biggest one is some time for yourself in the day. And that time for yourself could be it's what gets you what you need. And I'll use the example for me. After meetings, I like to just take a walk, and that walk could be a longer walk or a short walk. It could be, I've had people say, why do you always get up and walk around the floor? And I'm lucky that, and most of us, your office will have a flow to it. Do that at home. When I'm working from home, I'll go out on the balcony and look outside, and it's just that break of those couple of seconds, even if it's just a 30-second or a minute, or maybe it's a 10-minute break, of just being able to compartmentalize. Okay, over with that, on to the next one. If for others, it could be where you take time to read. And that reading could be, whether it's things that are business, whether it's, a nonfiction or a fiction. What is it that gets you going? It could be articles. It could be watching a podcast or listening to a podcast. It's really finding what is your grounding part that can bring you back to it. And I think a lot of times we forget to do that. And taking some me time during the day, you think that when you're on at work and you're on pay, that you're doing something wrong. No, you're actually prepping yourself and making yourself better for the organization you work for and the people that you work for and that work with you, so that you can actually be 100% present in the next thing that you're going and doing.
I love that permission of even the micro moments of white space to be able to be fully present. I love that. So now we're going to move on to one of my favorite parts, lightning round.
Awesome.
Where I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions, and I want your thoughts on the top of your head. So my first question is, and this is similar to the last one, Joe, but what's one morning ritual or morning routine that keeps you grounded and starts your day off on the right foot?
Right now it's working out. My wife and I go to the gym 5 days a week, and that's so up early at the gym and hitting the weights and the running, and it just, again, it gets me started and ready for the day.
Awesome. Yes, you and I are two birds of a feather. I also usually have my Peloton behind me because we'll hop on the Peloton or go for a run. Tonight is a little different. I have a hockey game at 10:15 p.m. So it's going to be on the other side.
Shift it to the end of the day.
Yes, so important. What's one book, podcast, leadership resource that's changed the way you think of leadership?
I'm going to go off the sort of beaten path on this one. For me, it's to TV shows, and they're old TV shows, but it's two TV shows that I can take and I say the world can be fixed by these two TV shows. And one was ER, and just some of the leadership that you see in there, and the other one was West Wing. And the reason I say that is that for me, they help to shape some of the ways that I look at things. And I read lots, but I'm also a TV fan. And my wife will say that I will overindulge in watching things over again. I've probably gone through ER and West Wing 100 times each, but it is really there's is a connection between the real world and the fiction world as well.
That's totally, and I love that. I love that that's authentic, right? We often think it has to be some kind of like amazing literature. It can be as simple as a framework that you've seen in a TV show and how it relates, because it's also so important to connect that culture piece. So on the culture piece, what's one thing you wish more leaders understood about culture?
Culture is the most important one. And there's that old adage about culture eats strategy for breakfast or for dinner, whichever one you want to call it. But the reality is you can have the best idea in the world, the best strategy. If you don't have a culture that buys into it, and you don't have a culture that's all rowing in the same direction, and you don't have a culture that you can easily define, it's not going to work. And I think it's one of the biggest failures that leaders can have is not creating, or it's not you creating it, it's the co-creation of the culture within an organization or within a team that allows you to be able to be successful in whatever strategy you're doing.
And what's one quote or phrase that you live by?
So I'll go back to ER and West Wing. You set the tone from ER, and what's next from West Wing. And I think from a leadership point of view, we set the tone in every single thing we do, every single point of the day. And the what's next, that's being curious and being able to ask, what do we do next? Where is this world going to, and how do we help out? What do we do on the team? So those two are my go-tos on anything, and it's actually defined a lot of how I run any team that I'm working with.
All right. So my final question, if we were to talk to Joe Reid years ago, before your 30 years of financial services experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Be generous. And I don't mean, I think there's a way that you can be generous. Generous with your time with others is one of them, but being generous with yourself. And when we talk about failure, you're as a leader, you're going to fail every single day. And if you don't, you're probably not doing it right, because it's a learning curve of doing it. So being generous with yourself on taking that time and recognizing that growing at different things takes time to be able to do. And then the generous with your time, if you are a leader and you're not taking time for your team, and you're just sitting in your office and never opening the door, you're not going to be able to create the culture of growth and winning that you need. So it's that part cuts both ways for yourself and for others.
And you are exemplifying that generosity with your generous time. Thank you so much, Joe, for all of your, I've learned so much from you working with you. I learned so much from you now as a, mentor and a leader in this space. So thank you so much for sharing your generous wisdom with all of us. It's been a pleasure, and I am so grateful. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Lindsay. I really appreciate the time.